He once called me a filthy sewer rat.
And so when people say, well, you were in High Noon, weren't you? Oh, yeah, and they think of me as one of those three guys that did the, in the shootout, which was not true at all. I was the drunk that Cooper threw out of the jail at High Noon and that went in the bar, which is...
Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, Jack Elam was regarded as the man who played villains the most, yet lived the most honestly in Hollywood. He did not bow to directors, he was not intimidated by A-list stars, and he had even less patience for those who were celebrated purely because of artificial glamour. The list of his enemies stretched from untouchable monuments of the industry to polished, picture-perfect leading men. Some specialized in portraying upright, righteous characters, yet in real life always chose whichever side benefited them most. Others made a show of kindness, while in truth they were con artists who enjoyed exploiting people around them. But the most disturbing of all was a certain male star who reportedly slept with 10 models at a time and turned friendliness itself into a weapon, one used to manipulate and isolate his colleagues. So which fellow actor provoked such deep hatred from Jack Elam? Let us turn back the clock to the golden age of Western films, because the truth behind this feud will force you to look at an entire Hollywood icon through a completely different lens. If the hidden backstage corners of Hollywood from that era still spark your curiosity, please hit like to support the channel. It helps us continue telling the stories that were once buried. And if you want to understand how Hollywood truly operated behind the lights in those days, hit like and join us as we keep digging deeper into these untold stories. Chapter 1. John Wayne. He always played the righteous man, but in real life he chose whichever side benefited him. Before they ever worked on a film together, Jack Elam and John Wayne had no personal animosity toward each other. They respected one another as fellow actors within the Western genre. Jack Elam, with his signature wandering eye, and John Wayne, with his heavy, commanding gait, were two complementary pieces that helped create legendary cinematic moments. However, everything changed the moment the word action was called. It happened on the set of Rio Lobo. After the entire crew had been utterly exhausted by 20 straight hours of continuous filming, John Wayne suddenly launched into a thunderous 2-hour patriotic speech. He paced back and forth among the supporting actors, his booming voice filled with solemn authority. "You have to understand, this isn't just about making a movie. We are preserving the soul of America. Sacrifice and courage are what set us apart." Sitting on a prop ammunition crate, a burned-out cigarette dangling between his fingers, Jack Elam gently rubbed his temples. To him, Wayne's voice at that moment sounded no different from an unbearable grating noise. Wayne stepped forward and pointed directly at Elam's face. "Jack, especially you, your character's sacrifice for mine has to be perfect. It has to make the audience believe that even an outlaw can die for something noble." Elam slowly looked up, a deeply sarcastic smile spreading across his face. He stared at Wayne the way one might look at a stag desperately trying to show off its oversized antlers. "Noble?" Elam's voice was rough and hoarse, like the way you sit comfortably in your luxury mansion, writing letters to the men who are actually out there fighting. The set fell into absolute silence. Every backstage sound seemed to be swallowed by collective shock. The scar of avoiding the war that Wayne had always tried to conceal behind heroic roles was ripped wide open by Elam's words. Wayne's face flushed red, the muscles in his jaw twitching uncontrollably. He roared, "What the hell do you know? I've spent my entire life building the image of a strong America." The confrontation grew so intense that director Howard Hawks had to shout, "Gentlemen, for God's sake, we still have scenes to shoot." But Wayne refused to stop. He leaned in close to Elam's face. "If it weren't for that miserable face of yours making me look good by comparison, I would have thrown you out of Hollywood a long time ago." The insult struck like a spark to dry tinder, yet Jack Elam did not blink. He stood up, calmly brushing the dust off his costume. "Go ahead and try, Duke," Elam whispered, his voice so calm it was unsettling. Wayne clenched his teeth, his fists shaking with rage. But under the pleading of director Howard Hawks and the pressure from the rest of the crew, he was forced to step back. The clash ended in an uneasy ceasefire, but the hatred had officially taken root. For the remainder of the Rio Lobo production, the atmosphere on set was thick with hostility. Wayne began using the power of his superstar status to create obstacles. He demanded that the director cut down Elam's dialogue and push his scenes into the shadows, both literally and figuratively. Their relationship after that film was completely destroyed. They never acknowledged each other again, and Wayne swore he would never share the screen with Elam. Many years later, when Wayne passed away and was praised as an immortal symbol of patriotism, Jack Elam simply took a long drag from his cigarette when asked about his former colleague. He was a great actor, especially when it came to playing a great man. It's just a shame that real life doesn't come with a ready-made script that lets you choose the right side. But for Jack Elam, John Wayne was only the opening chapter. Soon after, another man entered his crosshairs, a figure hailed as a genius, yet one who concealed an authoritarian nature and a blind faith that was even more terrifying. 2. Charlton Heston. He constantly preached morality, yet behaved like a madman. At first, the relationship between Charlton Heston and Jack Elam was based purely on mutual respect. One was a monumental icon of epic cinema, the other the legendary scar-faced villain. They entered the film set with the mindset of professionals ready to give their all. But what awaited them instead was a brutal collision. In Jack Elam's eyes, Charlton Heston behaved like a god dispensing favors. Heston lived as though he had never taken off the robe of Moses from the Ten Commandments. One afternoon, after finishing a press speech about the moral responsibility of artists, Heston immediately strode toward the set, his face cold as stone, angrily confronting the director over a detail that displeased him. On the way, he bumped into a logistics worker struggling to carry heavy coils of cable. The young man hurriedly stepped aside but accidentally dropped a prop box right near Heston's feet. Panicked, he bent down to pick it up, stammering, "I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." Heston stopped. He frowned as if he had just brushed against something filthy, then curtly spat out a contemptuous remark. "Next time, stay out of my way." Jack Elam was leaning against a shadowy corner, having witnessed the entire spectacle. The blatant hypocrisy was something he could not ignore. The sound of ash being flicked from a cigarette rang out, followed by a sarcastic voice. "Hey, you there, Charlton," Elam called out sharply. "I thought you just finished preaching about compassion less than 10 minutes ago, didn't you?" Heston slowly turned around. His gaze dropped toward Elam as if looking down on a blasphemer. "Jack, you don't understand," Heston said, his voice still deep and warm yet icy beneath the surface. "If we want to preserve the dignity of this industry, we must maintain order." Elam curled his lip, a crooked smile full of mockery. "That's rich. You stand on a podium preaching morality like a prophet, but in reality you treat people no better than slaves." The sculpted features of Heston's face twitched. He snarled, each word sharp and deliberate. "You're just a supporting actor, Jack. Your job is to help make me look perfect on screen." With that, Heston shoved Elam aside without hesitation. The push did not knock Elam down, but it ignited a smoldering rage. Elam quickly stepped after him, his rough hand grabbing the shoulder of Heston's expensive silk shirt and yanking him back. "Stop right there, Moses," Elam growled softly, his voice hoarse like stone grinding on stone. Heston froze. No one in Hollywood, least of all a supporting actor, had ever dared to lay hands on him so roughly. His face contorted with shock mixed with fury. "You dare touch me?" Elam laughed, a hollow sound. "Yes, I dare. Say one more word and that handsome face of yours is finished." The incident only ended when security and the director intervened. Heston walked away with an air of disdain, yet there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. Confusion at a man who clearly feared nothing. From that day on, Heston regarded Elam as an enemy of civilization. He used his influence to spread rumors that Elam was a man who was mentally unstable. Many directors began to hesitate whenever Jack Elam's name was mentioned, fearing that his presence would disrupt the dignified atmosphere that A-list stars like Heston were so determined to protect. In later interviews, Jack Elam would sometimes laugh when speaking about Heston. He talked about salvation all day long, but was ready to shout the moment his suit got dirty. But even these clashes with aging monuments were nothing compared to the next coming storm. If Heston represented the hypocrisy of old power, then the next name on Elam's list of contempt belonged to someone even more toxic. 3. Robert Wagner. He slept with 10 women in one night. Before they ever met, Elam had already heard plenty of whispers about Hollywood's flashy playboy, rumors of a man who climbed the ladder through connections rather than talent. But the reality was shocking even to a hardened veteran like Elam. In Elam's words, Robert Wagner was a high-class parasite. Wagner arrived on set with a privileged pass handed to him outright. He constantly made demands. While the crew struggled against dust and blistering heat, Wagner treated the production like a luxury vacation. He presented a long list of requirements, from insisting on having 10 models surrounding him to demanding breakfasts prepared from premium ingredients and presented like a 5-star restaurant in the heart of Beverly Hills. Does the kid think he's here to make a movie or to pick a bride for royalty? Elam muttered through a drag of his cigarette, his eyes contemptuously fixed on Wagner's private car. Once, when Wagner complained that the lighting made his skin look less radiant, Elam finally lost his composure. He stepped forward, positioning himself directly in front of Wagner. "Hey, do you know the difference between a real actor and a spoiled prince?" Wagner raised an eyebrow and adjusted the collar of his silk shirt. "Are you trying to teach me something, Jack?" Elam leaned in close, the strong smell of tobacco overpowering Wagner's expensive cologne. "Sleeping with 10 women doesn't make you more handsome, and when you fall, those models will be the first to step on your face to find another tree with greener leaves." Wagner smirked, his gaze dripping with superiority. "So what? I'm still rich. That's all that matters." He swept his eyes over Elam's dust-stained costume as if looking at discarded trash. Without a word of warning, Wagner casually tilted the crystal glass in his hand, letting the expensive red wine spill down the front of Elam's shirt. The dark liquid soaked into the old fabric. Wagner released the glass, allowing it to shatter on the ground, then turned and walked away, tossing back a final remark. "Go wash your clothes, Jack. Your cheap cigarette smell is ruining my morning." The sudden humiliation left Elam frozen in place. His entire body trembled. His already peculiar eyes now burned with an extreme, feral rage. He clenched his fists, breathing hard like a cornered beast. It took a long while and the intervention of backstage crew members before Elam regained a bitter sense of control. He spat onto the pile of shattered crystal, his gaze following Wagner's retreating figure with murderous intensity. From that day on, the relationship between them became an unbridgeable chasm. Wagner used his influence to ensure that Elam never appeared in any social circle where he was present. Meanwhile, Elam treated his continued existence in Hollywood as a form of revenge against that spoiled brat. Decades passed. As Robert Wagner gradually sank into personal scandals, Jack Elam maintained his standing as a hardened old guard. When once asked by chance about that former prince, Elam merely shrugged. "I told you, things built out of plaster and expensive perfume always crack sooner or later." But even his irritation with Prince Wagner was soon pushed aside, for Jack Elam was about to face a true specter, someone who did not rely on power or money to dominate others, but instead used his own deranged genius to suffocate the souls of everyone around him. 4. Clint Eastwood. Working with him felt like working with a robot. Before they ever had the chance to collaborate, Elam held a sincere admiration for Clint Eastwood, almost to the point of reverence. That admiration, however, shattered into pieces the moment they began working together. Instead of an ideal hero, Elam found himself facing a terrifying black hole of discipline and a merciless divine enforcer. One morning, as the sun began to cast a golden glow over the western mountain ranges, Eastwood stood behind the camera, his eyes narrowed with calculated focus. He instructed Elam to stand at an exact spot, to look straight ahead, not to deviate by even a millimeter. With his usual devil-may-care attitude, Elam started adding subtle shoulder movements. Immediately, a voice cut in. "Jack, stay still for me." Elam stopped short and turned to look at Eastwood, who stood there with his arms crossed. "Hey, Clint, I'm acting here. This character needs a bit of human in him." Eastwood stepped closer, his face completely expressionless, his gaze cold as ice. "In my films, structure is supreme. The lighting, camera angles, and rhythm are all carefully calculated. The human elements you're talking about are ruining my composition. All you need to do is stand there, deliver your lines correctly, and hold your position. That's it." A jolt ran down Elam's spine. He realized that, to Eastwood, co-stars were not kindred spirits. They were merely props with voices, serving the vision of a creator god. "You know, Clint," Elam growled, "acting with you feels like acting opposite a robot." Ignoring Elam's complaint entirely, Eastwood quietly returned to his director's chair and said to his assistant, as if Elam were not even present, "Reset. If he moves again, cut his scene." Clint Eastwood carried out that threat with ruthless precision. Throughout the rest of the film, whenever Elam tried to introduce even the slightest personal touch, a furrowed brow, a distinctive sigh, Eastwood would silently signal the editor, "Cut him out of the shot." By the time the film premiered, Jack Elam was stunned to discover that his strongest moments had been mercilessly trimmed away. Eastwood had used the editing scissors to turn a deeply individual actor like Elam into a faint shadow, a lifeless mannequin standing rigidly in frame, exactly as demanded by his doctrine of structure. From that point on, their relationship fell into a deep silence. There were no loud confrontations like those with Wayne, nor public humiliation like with Heston. Eastwood simply erased Jack Elam from his universe. For a man who valued absolute control, there was no room for variables prone to improvisation. In later interviews, whenever Eastwood's name came up, Elam would just smirk. "Working with Clint is like working with a laser scanner. He doesn't see you as a human being." To Jack Elam, Clint Eastwood embodied a new generation of Hollywood, efficient, minimalist, cold, and utterly devoid of human warmth. But this was not the only case, because the next man would prove even more disturbing. 5. James Garner. He played the nice guy like it was an addiction. Although Hollywood as a whole tipped its hat to James Garner's courtesy, Jack Elam could not stand him. To Elam, Garner was a professional nice guy, someone who had turned kindness into a carefully calculated commodity. On set, Garner always played the role of the generous gentleman, happily buying beers for the entire crew. But Elam, guided by the instincts of a lifelong villain actor, quickly realized that Garner's kindness shone brightest only when cameras or journalists were nearby. One evening after filming Wrapped, Garner approached Elam and offered him a glass of whiskey, wearing his familiar friendly smile. "Jack, you're really impressive," he said. "But I think in tomorrow's scene you might want to tone down your facial expressions a bit and focus more on the dialogue. That would be better for both of us." Elam looked at the glass, then slowly sneered, his eyes boring into Garner's. "You mean I should act less, so your ugly mug looks better by comparison, right?" The smile on Garner's face stiffened. The good guy mask cracked in the silence. Garner lowered his voice, his tone turning dark and threatening. "I'm just trying to make the film better. You should learn to be a bit more cooperative, Jack." "Oh, I'm extremely cooperative," Elam replied, his hoarse voice dripping with sarcasm. "Your friendliness always comes with an invoice. You're kind so people will serve you more eagerly, so you can protect that title of Hollywood's most beloved man. How wonderful." Garner set the glass down on the table, adjusted his collar, and walked away with a calm that was almost frightening. From that day on, Garner maintained his kind demeanor toward Elam in public, but behind the scenes, he quietly used his influence to isolate him. At rap parties, Jack Elam's name suddenly vanished from the guest lists. When Elam showed up on set, he noticed his shooting schedule had been pushed into the most inconvenient hours, while Garner was always given priority. In interviews, when asked about his co-stars, Garner enthusiastically praised everyone, except Elam. Their relationship eventually settled into a decades-long state of Cold War. Whenever they crossed paths at Hollywood events, Garner would still flash his trademark smile. Elam made no effort to reconcile. Years later, when reflecting on that period, he merely shrugged and said, "James was a good card player. I'd rather be a loser than a winner who cheats in the name of kindness." But the list of people who made Elam's blood boil was still not finished, for he was about to face another kind of darkness, someone who did not need a smile to manipulate others, but used his own madness to torment his fellow actors. 6. Steve McQueen. He was like a troublemaker in a mental institution. In Jack Elam's world, his relationship with Steve McQueen began with nothing but deep, visceral hatred. Elam had never cared for the press-crafted title King of Cool that surrounded McQueen. To him, it was a product of cheap promotion rather than genuine ability. McQueen, in Elam's eyes, was a master of petty tricks. Working with McQueen, Elam believed, was like sharing oxygen with someone constantly trying to suffocate everyone else. On set, McQueen was always causing trouble in subtle ways. Whenever another actor had dialogue, he would flick a lighter, adjust the brim of his hat, or make some small movement, just enough to draw every eye back to himself. One scene under the scorching desert sun became the final straw. As Elam was fully immersed in the moment, McQueen deliberately began flipping a coin into the air the instant the camera turned toward him. Elam stopped, his voice rough and hoarse. "Hey, Steve, are you acting, or are you putting on a magic show?" McQueen flashed a smug smile and shrugged. "I'm just adding a little flavor to the character, that's all." "You think I don't see what you're doing?" Elam shot back, his eyes sharp enough to pierce McQueen's self-satisfaction. "You're not making the film better. You're afraid that if you stand still, people will realize you've got nothing but that rough, tough look." McQueen's face froze. He stepped in close. "People pay to watch me. You're just background. So do your job as background." Elam let out a dry, mocking laugh. "You're right. I am background. But real background lasts longer than borrowed stardom. You can steal the spotlight today, but you'll never earn the respect of the people standing beside you." The confrontation ended only when the director stepped in. In the days that followed, McQueen used his star power to trim away Elam's best scenes. Elam did not respond with noise or spectacle. He answered with contemptuous silence and a stillness like stone amid McQueen's theatrical currents. To Elam, McQueen embodied a generation of Hollywood that was dazzling yet hollow, always ready to step on others just to shine a little brighter. But the hypocrisy and selfishness of these stars were still not the worst of it. There was one final name left on Elam's list, a man whose ego was enormous and whose power turned the film set into a place built solely to serve him. 7. Burt Reynolds. His charm was nothing more than a product with an expiration date. In the 1970s, Burt Reynolds dominated the box office. But in the eyes of a hardened veteran like Jack Elam, the actor was little more than a spoiled child indulged far too much. On the set of the Cannonball Run, the atmosphere was constantly disrupted by Reynolds' chaotic entrances and his large entourage. Reynolds behaved as if every inch of ground he stepped on ought to be gilded. During one group scene, he casually made the entire crew wait for hours just so he could perfect the look of his mustache. When it came time to shoot, Reynolds walked up and slapped Jack Elam on the shoulder as if patting a waiter, speaking in a condescending tone. "Hey, old man, try to stand off to the side a bit when we're rolling." Jack Elam slowly brushed Reynolds' hand off his shoulder. He looked straight into the superstar's eyes, his voice calm yet razor-sharp. "I was acting alongside real legends back when you were still learning how to ride a wooden horse." Reynolds smirked, adjusted his expensive leather jacket, his eyes openly contemptuous of actors he considered past their prime. "Times have changed, Jack. That heavy, old-school acting of yours just makes movies feel outdated." Elam answered Reynolds' arrogance with a sneer. "Your charm is just a product with a limited shelf life. It will devour you the moment that smug smile of yours starts to wrinkle." Silence fell across the set. Reynolds froze, the self-satisfaction flickering out of his eyes for an instant. But he quickly turned away, tossing back a final jab. "We'll see who falls first, old man." Jack Elam was not joking. In the years that followed, as Burt Reynolds' glow began to fade under the weight of poor choices and unchecked arrogance, people came to see just how accurate Elam's words had been. Reynolds was gradually abandoned by the very industry he had once ruled. Meanwhile, Jack Elam remained towering and immovable, a monument to endurance, respected by later generations for his dedication to the craft and his uncompromising sincerity. To Jack Elam, Burt Reynolds was a costly lesson in vanity. He despised Reynolds not for his success, but for his selective friendliness and his disdain for the core values of acting. 8. Rock Hudson. They put him on display like a doll inside a glass case. Elam once considered Rock Hudson the ideal model. Perfect looks, genuine acting talent, and a warm personality. Elam believed Hudson was a breath of fresh air in a scandal-ridden Hollywood. But when he finally had the chance to work with the star, Elam's admiration turned into revulsion. What made him hate him to the bone was not Hudson as a person, but the systematic deception that had manufactured his name. In Elam's eyes, Hudson was not a man, but an industrial product, meticulously polished. He despised the way Hollywood turned a human being into a flawlessly sculpted, muscle-bound heartthrob, a symbol built on layers of lies to please the public. Once, while watching Hudson strain to play a gallant, romantic lead under blazing studio lights, Elam stood in a shadowed corner of the set and muttered to a fellow actor beside him, "Look at that. They're putting on a puppet show. They wrap him in a hero shell, teach him how to smile, how to walk, then lock him inside a glass cage." For someone who worshipped truth as fiercely as Elam did, Hudson's presence on screen felt like an insult. He saw it as a collective con, where the entire production, the studio, and even the actor himself conspired to perform a play that existed outside the script. When Hudson approached Elam with a radiant textbook Hollywood smile, Elam looked him up and down and replied pointedly, "That's a nice smile, Rock." Hudson hesitated. "I'm just doing my job well, Jack. The audience wants to see a hero, and I give them what they want." Elam curled his lip, took a long drag on his cigarette, and exhaled the smoke into the air. "You're not the one to blame, Rock. You're just a pitiful victim of this factory of artificiality. But don't ask me to respect you." To Elam, Hudson was living proof that Hollywood could destroy individual identity in exchange for profit. He did not hate Hudson the man, but he absolutely could not accept the hollow heartthrob image that the system had created. The feuds with monuments and leading men were drawing to a close, but the chronicle of Jack Elam's contempt still had one final page left to turn, a chapter about a man branded a genius, whom Elam believed was not only fake but carried within him the seeds of brutality justified in the name of art. And in the end, the most frightening thing is not the question of whom Jack Elam hated, but why he hated with such intensity. Elam did not hate out of jealousy, nor because he had been outplayed in the game of fame. He hated because he saw with painful clarity the rot behind the spotlight. People celebrated not for their talent, but for their power, their connections, and the fear they spread to keep others in line. Jack Elam grasped, very early on, a truth that Hollywood has always tried to avoid. This industry does not collapse because of obvious villains, but because of great men who are never questioned. Men who walk onto film sets like royalty, while dozens of nameless people behind them break their backs just to keep the machine running. He did not write memoirs to defend himself. He did not stand before cameras to accuse anyone. He did not construct an image of himself as a kind man or a victim of oppression. Elam chose silence. He chose to turn away and to let his contempt exist as a verdict that required no explanation. Only now, as backstage stories slowly come to light, do people begin to understand. Jack Elam was not a difficult man. He was an uncomfortable mirror, one that reflected things Hollywood never wanted to see. And perhaps it was precisely because he refused to pretend to respect those who did not deserve it that Elam was labeled unlikable for his entire life. So, in the end, was Jack Elam a bitter man or a rare, clear-eyed observer in a world built on pretense? Perhaps the answer lies in the very discomfort this story leaves behind. Because sometimes the people who are hated the most are the ones who speak the truest words. And one final question to leave with you. If Jack Elam were alive in Hollywood today, who would he hate next? And would we have the courage to admit that many of the legends worshipped for decades were never as clean as the images they sold to the public? Leave a comment below. Do you stand with Jack Elam or with the stars he despised? And don't forget to follow the channel as we continue to peel back untold backstage secrets, where fame, power, and hypocrisy collide without mercy.